Agit vach, hamazl de gevach, avach fil mit Yeshia. Okay, another week in the books. Baruch Hashem, we had an amazing week. Pidam, Monday, Tuesday, we didn't have shir. We had Wednesday and Thursday, so today's weekly review will be a shorter weekly review. We're going to be starting from Chav Gimel Amud Beis, on the top, the beginning, the first line, by the second to last word, Umi Amar. So, just to give a little bit of a background on what this is, and a little bit of an explainer, real quick, before we go into it. So, we have by us a brisa that's on Amud Aleph that discusses using an animal for a wall. Can use an animal for a wall? Rameir says no. Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Why? Comes Abai and Reb Zer to explain why Rameir says no. Abai says, Chayash Lemisa, we suspect he may die during the 7 days. Reb Zer says may run away. So now, we went through a bunch of scenarios back and forth, and that introduces us to our Gemara. So, our Gemara starts off, on Mi Amar Abaya, Rameir Chayash Lemisa, Reb Yehuda Loi Chayash. Does Abaya really say this? That Rameir suspects that the animal may die, and he's Chayash for Misa and Reb Yehuda not? I'm going to show you a case, and I'm going to bring you a Mishnah and a Brisa, someplace else, to prove this wrong. And where is that? That's in Masechtas Gittin. V'hatnan, Bas Yisrael shenesis l'kayin, v'halach l'medinas yam, v'halach ba'al l'medinas yam, achelas b'truma, b'cheskes shu kayim. That's the Mishnah. A lady who is a Yisraelis, she marries a Kayin, and her husband goes to Medinas Yam. She has, based on the chazakah that her husband is alive, she's allowed to eat truma. Obviously, we're not chayash for misa. Second part of it comes a brayse and says, it says Vraminan, and we ask a steer on that. Vraminan Allah. Miyad. And we ask a steer on it from a brayse that says, a husband, meaning the kohen, gives his wife a get, and it's not chal right away because he puts a stipulation. He says, this is your get. It comes into effect a moment before I die. And it comes into effect a moment before I die. Therefore, we say, what happens if when she eats it, let's call it an hour before he dies. So let's say right now she eats truma and he dies within the hour. So retroactively, she was divorced to him. And in that case, she's no longer allowed to eat truma. So she ate truma, and it was also for her. She's an Israelis at that point. Now, why are we doing this? Why did he want to do it? Because if, let's say, he wouldn't have divorced her and would have stayed married to her and would have died, she would now have to get yibum or chalitza and so on. So we wanted to be able to prevent that. Let's say we don't know where the brother is or so on. So we had this. So here we have a Mishnah and a Brisa that say two different things. One, loy chayash v'misa. One is chayash v'misa. And who holds what? So comes over there in Gittin, v'amar Abaya, loy kash, this is not a stira. Why not? Harameir de loy chayash l'misa, harab Yehuda de chayash l'misa. This is Rameir, who's not chayash l'misa, meaning the Mishnah goes according to Rameir. This is what Abaya is explaining it. And the Brisa goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, that is chayash l'misa. So you see clearly, this goes against what Abaya said by us. By us, Rameir is chayash l'misa. By Gittin, Rameir is not, according to Abaya, so that's a stira. So we want to understand, first of all, okay, but where does Abaya get to say that Rameir is chayash or loy chayash and Rabbi Yehuda is chayash? So we bring an additional brisa. Now, what's the purpose of this brisa? Because by the case of Gittin, it doesn't say clearly who says what. Abaya is the one that's explaining, and he says, based on his knowledge, this is Rameir, this is Rabbi Yehuda. But we don't have concrete evidence, as we call it. Let's call it concrete evidence. But where do we have it? There's a brisa someplace else. And that brisa is talking about by, I forgot where it is, but it's talking about the wine. They are truma. Basically, it's a case that we says it's, what's it called? Basically, the case over there is like this. There's someone who's Erev Shabbos, he managed to get a hold of some wine. Now he got it from Kutim, and he has to separate truma from it in order to drink it and consume it on Shabbos. You cannot separate on Shabbos truma. So he wants to do before Shabbos. He doesn't have any barrels to separate it into. He has no way of separating it, and he has to separate 2%. Let's say we're talking about 100 lugim. He has to separate 2 lugim, like the Gemara says, for truma. Then he has to separate Meiser Rishon, and so on. So what happens? He separates it, and he uses a concept called brera. Brera means it's retroactive. He basically says, I'm being mafresh it, and he's not being mafresh it. He basically says, listen, I have in this cup 10 ounces, I'm being mafresh 2 ounces, but the 2 ounces that I'm being mafresh are not the 2 that I drink from. So Motzei Shabbos, when he gets a hold of wine, or of another barrel, he leaves behind 2 ounces, and he pours that too over there. And he says, basically, brera means that on Motzei Shabbos, when I can be mafresh it, know that everything I drank was not it, this was. It's a sort of retroactively we see that this is what he meant. And that's what Rameir says. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's not. So let's look at it inside. So it comes like this, the Tanya. He says, 2 lugin that I will be mafresh, they're truma. Fine, simple. Asara Meiser Rishon, Tisha Meiser Sheni, each one of their own. Basically, there's truma, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. So he says clearly, I will be mafresh it from here. Umechal, and he can redeem, basically he can, for the Meiser Sheni, he's able to transfer it over to money. That he's able to do. He does that, and he redeems it. So here we see clearly, it says that Rameir allows it. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Oisrin, and again we're going to look at Rabbi Yehuda because that's who it's going, Rabbi Yehuda and Rameir. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon all agree that it's no good. Again, now that we're moving on to the next Amud, I'm remembering, just like all the Shurim, this year is a schus for Akiva Simcha Vega, for a schus for Chava Bas Miriam, for Zivug Hagen, and the Karev, Ahuva Bas Miriam also, and Dodaria Ben Penina Pearl. We'd also remind, I'd like to thank that anonymous sponsor for sponsoring the weekly Thursday night Children's Hegel, also for Heshi Rosenbaum for sponsoring the raffle that will be in another 2 weeks, and the anonymous sponsor for the $500 Chazara raffle. Okay. Epoch. So now we get to this point, and now we see clearly. What do we see? We see that in that case, by B'kiyas Hanoid, what's the whole thing? Rameir says the concept of brera, all this. But why would they say it is good, not good? So we say that Rameir allows you to separate it because of brera, and he allows you to drink it, but what? He's obviously not concerned that the jug will break. Because if he was concerned, he wouldn't allow you to do brera. And Rabbi Yehuda was concerned that it would break. That's why he doesn't allow you to drink it, because he's concerned. Even if you want to, let's say brera, which he doesn't agree with, we're going to see later. But even if you do want to say it, he's concerned that the jug will break. You will have drank tevel, and that's a problem. Talking about drinking, to the anonymous guy that told me about the cup. Mordechai. Okay. So Epoch, let's say the Rameir is not talking about this brisa. Let's say, because this brisa contradicts Abaya on Abaya, not Rameir, I'm sorry, Abaya. Because this brisa contradicts Abaya on himself. He says Rameir is chayash from Misa, and over here we see, he says Rameir is not chayash by B'kiyas Hanoid, which again, we're going to equate to Misa somewhat, meaning a breaking of a barrel. So we say, let's say, Abaya is not talking about, he's not bringing this case of B'kiyas Hanoid, he's bringing the case where? Of our Mishnah, of our Gemara, our Brisa, which is using the animal for the wool. So Epoch, let's say different. Rameir chayash Misa, really Rameir is chayash Misa. Rabbi Yehuda loy chayash Misa, Rabbi Yehuda is not chayash Misa. And how do we know that? The Tanya, because we have a Brisa Bayas, Asal lebehema, Doifin l'sukkah, Rameir paisa, Rabbi Yehuda machsher. So he says, we see clearly Rameir is paisa, Rabbi Yehuda is machsher. So that goes according to what he says, and that works to explain how Abaya comes to his conclusion, or to his conclusion. It's not the right word, but that Rameir is the one that's not chayish for Misa by the one more time. That Rameir says by the Mishnah and Brisa by Gittin. Rameir says that Rameir keep saying Rameir when I mean to say Abaya. Abaya says by that case, by the Mishnah and Gittin and the Brisa over there, Abaye said, originally he said, Reb Meir is not chayash for misa, Reb Yehuda is chayash for misa. Now we're saying, say the opposite. Abaye is not saying that Reb Meir says chayash for misa, Abaye says lo chayash for misa. I said it again wrong. One more time. One more time for everyone in the back and myself. He says like this. Abaye, in the case by the Mishnah and Brisa and Gittin, says, originally in our Gemara he says, Loi kasha harameir de loi chayash lemisa, harabuda de chayash lemisa. Rameir is not chayash, Rabuda is chayash. It's a problem Abaye and Abaye. So we say over here, Epoch, say the opposite. Rameir chayash lemisa, Rabuda loi chayash lemisa. And how does he get to that conclusion? Because of our Gemara. The Tanya, in our Gemara we have a Brisa. Salah behim adayfa in the Sukkah, Rameir poisa, Rabuda machsher. So clear, Rameir, Abaye says that Rameir holds he's chayash for misa, Rabbi Yehuda is not chayash for misa. Reb Meir chayash, Rabbi Yehuda not chayash. Reb Meir chayash, Rabbi Yehuda not chayash. We're gonna have to say it a bunch of times. Make sure we get it. Okay, so now comes the next piece of the Gemara. Kasha de Reb Meir. So now we have a stira on Reb Meir. Why? Because by us, Reb Meir, we finished this part. Now that we have this concept of B'kiyas Hanoid, that brisa, and that brisa says opposite. Clearly, Reb Meir over there. Clearly, Reb Meir says that he's not concerned of it breaking. Well, over here by us, in our brisa, clearly Reb Meir says he is concerned that he's going to die. So that's a steer. We have a question. And the same thing with Rabbi Yehuda, just the opposite. Kasha de Reb Meir ad Reb Meir. Amalach Reb Meir, Misa Shchicha. Reb Meir says Misa is more common. So his answer is, yeah, you say I have a stira. It's not a stira. When I say by us, by our brisa, that the person is, that the animal is shchiach, he says the animal dying is more shchiach. It's not common for barrels to break. And even more so, after the Masar Leil Shleimer, he could have had a guard watching it, making sure it didn't break. Every animal dies, not every barrel breaks. Therefore, he says it's not a kasha, it's apples to oranges, not apples to apples. So now we're going to say kasha Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda. Same thing. Rabbi Yehuda by says it's not chayash for misa, but by B'kiyas Hanoid, by the case of the barrel from the Kutim, he is concerned, which means he is chayash that the barrel is going to break. So the answer to there is no. Time of Rabbi Yehuda is lav mishum the chayash the B'kiyas Hanoid. He's not concerned that it's going to break. Ela mishum the less lebrera. He's concerned. He's not concerned. He doesn't hold of brera. He says, I don't hold to this whole concept that you're going to drink from a cup, and then Matzah Shabbos, you're going to say that the thing that you didn't drink from is truma, that somehow you didn't get to it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like the concept, and that's why. So he doesn't say that the reason is because it's going to break. Oh, so that's till where we got to this week. We're going to get to finish up the sugya on Monday, but we'll do a quick one more time, just recap. There's three things. There's our brisa in our Gemara. Reb Meir is chayash for misa. Rabbi Yehuda is not. Reb Meir says you cannot use an animal for a wall. Rabbi Yehuda says you can. That's why. Comes a case in Gittin. There's a Mishnah and a brisa, and over there we don't know who says what. So we wanted to verify who said what over there. One person is chayash for misa over there. One person is not. So how did we originally want to get to it? So Abaye is the one that said Reb Meir is not chayash for misa and Rabbi Yehuda is. So he said, okay, how does he know this? So we found a brisa. The Gemara found a brisa elsewhere that talks about taking wine from a kuti. And what does that brisa there say? It clearly says that Reb Meir says it's okay to drink it, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's not okay to drink it. So we assume Reb Meir is not chayash for misa, and Rabbi Yehuda is chayash for misa, and that would reconcile with what Abaye says by Gittin. Comes our Gemara, and it says no. Say the opposite. Why? Because if you leave it like that, then there's still a problem. Abaye is a stira on himself, because he's the one that says that Reb Meir is not chayash for misa by us, and he's the one by Gittin that says he is chayash for misa. So it's a stira. So how do we fix it? So we say epoch. Let's switch it around. Reb Meir is chayash for misa, and Reb Yehuda is not chayash for misa. And how do we know that? We're talking about in the case by Gittin. We know that because we say, let's use our brisa to prove what Abaye means by the case of Gittin. And again, what does our brisa say? Reb Meir is chayash, Reb Yehuda is not chayash. So he says, instead of him saying Vom Abaye lo kasha har Meir de lo chayash, he would say lo kasha har Meir de chayash, and he would just switch it. Very simple. Then we say, great. But now that we brought this brisa from B'kiyas Hanoid, The Bryce and Bekias Sonoid clearly states that Rameir says you could drink it, which means he doesn't suspect that the barrel will break. How does that work with our Brysa, where he says you cannot use an animal for the wall? So Rameir gives a simple answer. It's not apples to apples. Every animal dies, not every barrel breaks. So it's two separate things, they're not comparable. Here the reason why is this, it's possible to die. Here the reason is this, it's not so common that these animals die, that these barrels break. And the same thing we ask, Kasha Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda by us says you can use an animal for a wall, but over there he says you cannot drink. So why would he say that? So the answer is Rabbi Yehuda says it's not because he was concerned that the jug will break. His thing is he doesn't hold to the concept of breira, and that's why he says it. And by us he allows you to use an animal for a wall. He doesn't suspect it will break in any event, and that's where we got up to. Rabbi Isai, I saw that some of the guys put the chazaras on the chat already. Keep on rocking. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And Be'ez Hashem, I'll see everybody back on Monday. A gut tavach and a mazda gevach.